I know there were strikes in Ukraine overnight. We'll talk about that in a moment. But first, this deadline of peace in Ukraine in June, how significant, how likely, Michael?
It's not very significant in one sense, because President Trump is always setting deadlines and they tend to pass, and he just sets another one. So he set a deadline of Thanksgiving last year, which was the third week of November. When that passed, he then set a deadline of Christmas, and then that passed, and here we are now in February. So he set a new deadline, and I suspect that that will pass as well. I mean, we're at the end of a third iteration now of the peace process. It began about a year ago, just in about February last year, and so there was a first iteration of it in March and April. They went all the way around the circle and ended up where they'd started from, no chance of peace. They went around the same circle again in August, remember with the Alaska summit, that extraordinary event. Then we went a third time around the circle in November, December, January. This is taking longer to get around the circle this time because there's more detail in discussion, but we're still back where we started. So we've not moved any closer to peace since March last year, because what the Americans call their peace plan is just a sort of a revamped version of the Russian plan, which is a surrender plan, and the Ukrainians won't accept it. And so again, I mean, as we've said often, what this is all about is not really whether there'll be a peace deal, but who will the Americans blame? Who will President Trump blame as it breaks down? And so I have to say, I thought the Americans would walk away now, and they're not. So if President Trump is saying, well, we'll give it till June, that keeps we'll go around the circle a fourth time, probably in June. At some point, he will walk away, and who does he blame? And both sides are playing for the prize of having Trump back them in whatever's going to happen next.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And the backdrop of all of these peace talks are that strikes are continuing, not only in Ukraine, but across the border at all.
Yes, I mean, the Ukrainians, let's not forget, I mean, they're launching strikes overnight. They hit an oil depot in Saratov in Russia. Now, they are going for the oil refining capacities. They're not going for civilian targets as such. They're going for military targets, and they're trying to affect the refining capacity of Russia. And they're having some success in that. It won't win them the war, but it is putting strain on the Russian economy. The Russians are going for energy. And last night they went for 400 drones, 40 missiles. And again, they've done tremendous damage in at least 8 different centres of Ukraine, just as the weather is turning cold again. So the next few days, for the first half of next week, it's going to be very cold, down to 30 below, before it starts to warm up. If the Ukrainians can get through to early March, if they can get through to about the second week of March, then it's the Rasputitsa, which is the mud season. I mean, it's very predictable, so it gets very wet, first or second week of March. So the Ukrainians will be hoping that after this next spell of really cold weather, that by the middle of next week, maybe, they can look at higher temperatures, a bit less misery, as they get towards the Rasputitsa. We'll see.
OK. And just to wrap up those talks in Miami next week, obviously this peace deal's on the table. Are you hopeful looking at that?
No, I think what they'll do next week is they'll rehearse what it is that's keeping them apart, which is considerable. There's quite a lot of detail agreed. And so when people say we're nearer now to a deal than we've ever been, that's true, which is to say we're nearer to a deal, but we're still so far away it won't happen. And I think what they'll do is they'll put things together and agree that we'll talk about this, and take it to a bigger meeting in June. But what they're still talking about is all the things they would do if there is a deal. You know, all the backup, all the mechanics of a deal, if there is a deal. But the reason that all these mechanics can be talked about is because they're all theoretical. I mean, at the moment, there isn't going to be a deal. And unless something significantly changes on the battlefield, one side or the other might feel that they have to make a deal. At the moment, the Ukrainians think whatever happens, even if the Americans walk away from them completely, they will carry on. That's what they're feeling and saying at the moment. And the Russians will certainly carry on because they've given absolutely nothing nothing fundamental in these talks. They've held on to their maximalist demands. They have to have what they say they must have.